Bradbury College stood as a timeless sentinel against the march of modernity, a place where generations of scholars had walked the same cobbled pathways, studied beneath the same towering elms, and dreamed within the same centuries-old stone walls. Tucked away in the rolling hills of a quaint New England town, Bradbury was more than just an institution of learning. It was a living relic of a bygone era, revered for its tradition, its excellence, and above all, its seemingly impenetrable tranquility. The campus unfolded like a postcard from the past. Stately, ivy-draped buildings framed manicured lawns that stretched as far as the eye could see, and the crisp, clean air carried with it the faint scent of pine, old books, and wood smoke from distant fireplaces. Among students and faculty alike, there was often talk of the Bradbury bubble, an almost mythic sense of safety and insularity that separated the college from the harsher realities of the outside world. Here, ambition could flourish without fear. Ideas could be debated vigorously in sunlit classrooms without ever tipping into violence or cruelty. It was, many believed, a place apart, a sanctuary. On the morning of October 12th, the campus awoke to a scene that perfectly captured the season's changing face. A soft golden light spilled through the maple trees, painting the brick paths in shades of amber and crimson. Students bustled between lecture halls, their scarves trailing behind them like banners in the brisk autumn wind. Laughter echoed across the main quad, mingling with the distant chime of the chapel bell striking 9 o'clock. Professors, some carrying armfuls of leather-bound volumes, others clutching hot mugs of coffee, prepared for another day of lectures, discussions, and office hours. At the heart of campus stood the centerpiece of Bradbury's proud history, the Alden Memorial Library, a vast and imposing structure of stone and stained glass, its Gothic spires reaching toward the sky like the fingers of some ancient scholar pleading for knowledge. Inside, it was a sanctuary of whispers and rustling paper, the heavy scent of parchment lingering in the cool, filtered air. Rows upon rows of towering bookcases stretched away into the dimness, each one packed tight with the wisdom of centuries past. Beneath the vaulted ceiling, students found refuge in its shadowy alcoves, bent over laptops or yellowed tomes, their faces lit softly by green-shaded lamps. It was in this serene place, among the whispers of the past, that fate would play its cruelest hand. By noon, the town's famous fall festival was in full swing just beyond the campus gates. Stalls selling apple cider, hand-woven scarves, and spiced pastries dotted the town square, drawing students and locals alike. Children ran laughing through piles of fallen leaves while older couples strolled arm in arm, savoring the fleeting beauty of the season. To an outsider, the day could not have seemed more perfect, a portrait of Americana itself. But beneath the surface of Bradbury's idyllic image, subtle tensions stirred. A few professors traded worried glances in quiet corridors. A student newspaper article hinted at unrest brewing among the ranks over a contentious new academic policy. In hidden pockets of campus life, jealousy, ambition, and discontent, long dormant beneath the college's polished exterior, had begun to fester in the shadows. No one could have foreseen how violently those hidden tensions would erupt before the day was over. As the sun began its slow descent beyond the rolling hills, casting long, slanting shadows across the green, an unspeakable act would unfold inside the revered halls of Alden Memorial Library, an act that would tear through the Bradbury bubble and leave the college forever changed. When the clock struck 9 that night, the world would know that even here, in this place built on centuries of tradition, no wall of ivy or fortress of learning could keep darkness at bay. The evening of October 12th had settled over Bradbury College like a velvet blanket, dark and still. A crescent moon hung low over the centuries-old rooftops, its pale light casting skeletal shadows across the emptying quads. Most students had drifted back to their dormitories or ventured into town to enjoy the last hours of the fall festival, their laughter fading into the crisp night air. Within the Alden Memorial Library, however, a few lingering scholars remained, tucked away in isolated corners, chasing deadlines and cramming for midterms. Among them was Caroline Monroe, a junior history major known for her meticulous research habits and late-night study sessions. That evening, Caroline had found herself needing one final reference for her midterm paper, an obscure volume buried deep in the eastern wing of the library, a part of the building rarely frequented after dark. Clutching her worn canvas tote and a scribbled list of call numbers, she made her way through the maze of silent, dimly lit aisles. The eastern wing had always unsettled Caroline a little. The lighting was older here, softer, almost flickering, and the heavy silence pressed in from all sides. As she navigated the tight corridors between ancient, towering shelves, she noticed something strange out of the corner of her eye, a dark smear glistening against the polished marble floor. It was subtle at first, easy to mistake for a shadow or a spill. But as she moved closer, unease tightened around her like a vice. The smear was thick, dark, and unmistakably red. Her heartbeat quickened, pounding loudly in her ears. Driven by a mixture of dread and a terrible compulsion to know, Caroline followed the crimson trail as it snaked between the bookshelves, leading toward a recessed study nook, one of those hidden alcoves students only used when they needed absolute solitude. The shadows seemed heavier there, as if the very air recoiled from what it concealed. When Caroline stepped into the nook, her breath caught in her throat. There, slumped awkwardly beside an overturned chair, lay the lifeless body of Liam Carter. His familiar features, she had seen him around campus, even spoken to him once or twice, were frozen in an expression of shock and pain. His clothes were soaked in blood, the dark liquid pooling beneath him and seeping into the intricate patterns of the wooden floor. The wounds were horrific, deep, vicious stab marks torn into his chest and sides. Beside him, glinting obscenely under the low light, lay the murder weapon, a heavy, ornate letter opener, its blade smeared with blood. For a suspended second, the world seemed to tilt around Caroline. She could feel her knees weaken, her vision blur. Then instinct took over. A scream tore from her throat, raw, primal, and deafening, shattering the heavy stillness of the library. Her voice echoed off the soaring, vaulted ceilings, reverberating down the ancient hallways like a ghostly alarm. Within moments, the sleepy tranquility of Bradbury was shattered. Doors slammed open. Footsteps thundered down corridors. Other students, drawn by the scream, stumbled upon the gruesome scene, their shocked gasps and panicked whispers blending into a growing din of confusion and fear. Someone shouted for help. Someone else ran to fetch the front desk attendants. Faces pale with horror, a crowd began to gather, quickly swelling beyond control. Campus security arrived first, their radios crackling with urgency as they pushed back the onlookers and hastily erected a perimeter with yellow tape. Officers tried to herd the crowd away, but the damage was already done. The news had spread like wildfire. By the time the local police were called, the entire campus seemed to buzz with a collective, disbelieving dread. Phones lit up with frantic texts. Rumors spiraled in every direction, some exaggerated, some terrifyingly close to the truth. Everyone now knew the name of the victim. Liam Carter, a senior with a bright future ahead, a popular and ambitious political science major with internship offers already lined up for after graduation. And now, he was dead, brutally murdered inside the heart of the one place on campus that had always felt inviolable. In a matter of minutes, the Bradbury bubble, that cherished belief in the college's immunity to real-world horrors, had burst, and the shockwaves would ripple outward for weeks, months, even years to come. Within the hour of the grisly discovery, as flashing red and blue lights bathed the ivy-covered walls of Bradbury College in a surreal, nightmarish glow, Detective Laura Reynolds arrived on the scene. Her reputation had preceded her, known throughout the region as a relentless investigator with an almost uncanny ability to untangle the most intricate cases. Reynolds was the one authorities called when they needed results, not promises. She stepped out of her unmarked car, boots crunching against the cobblestone driveway slick with fallen leaves. Even before she crossed the library's threshold, she could feel it, the deep, throbbing anxiety that now gripped the entire campus. Students clustered in tight, whispering groups just beyond the police tape, their faces pale, their eyes wide with shock and fear. Professors stood nearby, stiff and silent, clutching mugs of coffee as if the warm ceramic might ward off the sudden chill that had nothing to do with the October air. Reynolds pushed through the cordoned-off entrance, greeted by the thick, musty scent of old paper and polished wood that always hung in historic libraries, now tainted with the sharper, metallic tang of blood. She paused just inside, taking in the sight before her with the practiced detachment of someone who had seen far too many scenes like this one, yet still respected the gravity of every new tragedy. The eastern wing of Alden Memorial Library, normally a sanctuary of quiet scholarship, had been transformed into a crime scene, an unholy marriage of ancient grandeur and brutal violence. Yellow evidence markers dotted the floor like jagged teeth. Crime scene photographers moved carefully among the rows, capturing every drop of blood, every overturned chair, every discarded clue. Reynolds' sharp eyes immediately registered the details that others might have missed. No signs of forced entry. No broken locks or windows. Nothing to suggest that a stranger had stormed the building in a fit of rage or madness. Instead, everything pointed to something far more intimate, far more chilling. She moved closer to the body of Liam Carter, now covered respectfully by a white sheet, and crouched low to examine the murder weapon, a heavy, ornate letter opener, its handle styled in the image of a Roman centurion. It didn't belong to the killer. It belonged to the library itself, an artifact pulled from the rare books display, which was housed just a few feet away. Reynolds rose to her full height, her mind already assembling a mental map of possibilities. The killer had not come prepared with a weapon. They had improvised, seizing what was readily available in a moment of anger, fear, or desperation. That single fact alone told her volumes. This was not a premeditated attack by an outsider. It had the hallmarks of a personal confrontation, something fueled by emotions rather than cold calculation. And Liam's personal items, his wallet, his laptop, his watch, remained untouched. There was no attempt to steal anything, no effort to cover the tracks. Whoever did this wasn't after money. They weren't after objects. They were after Liam himself. Standing amidst the swirling chaos of forensic technicians and anxious campus administrators, Detective Reynolds slowly turned a circle, surveying the scene with a steady, unwavering gaze. Every student, every professor, every staff member within the old stone walls of Bradbury College was now a potential witness or a potential suspect. She jotted down her initial observations into a worn leather notebook, her handwriting quick but precise, then snapped it shut with a decisive flick of her wrist. The preliminary examination of the scene had given her enough to know where to start. If this was personal, and every instinct she had screamed that it was, then the first threads of the investigation lay with the people who knew Liam best, his friends, his professors, his rivals, and anyone who might have had reason to envy, resent, or hate him. When the DNA analysis returned days later, the truth was undeniable. The bloodstains matched Liam Carter's genetic profile. No theory, no alibi could explain away the presence of Liam's blood on Daniel's hidden sweatshirt. It was physical evidence, tangible, damning, and devastating in its implications. Yet the hoodie was only the beginning. During a meticulous inspection of Daniel's personal belongings, another piece of evidence emerged, even more chilling than the first. Beneath the thin mattress of his twin bed, tucked between the metal bed frame and the worn-out padding, lay a small, battered leather journal. Its cover was scuffed and worn, the spine cracked with use, a private world hidden away, waiting to be unearthed. When Reynolds opened the journal, she felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. Inside, page after page unfurled a raw, unfiltered descent into Daniel Whitmore's darkest thoughts. It was not a diary in the traditional sense, not a record of daily events, but rather a seething collection of fragmented entries, angry scrawls written in a heavy, almost frantic hand. Each page dripped with resentment, loneliness, and rage. Some entries were mere sentences, jagged and raw. He took everything from me. They only see him. Always him. Maybe it's better if he's gone. Maybe then they'll finally notice me. Other entries spiraled into long, rambling diatribes, detailed descriptions of slights both real and imagined, betrayals that festered in Daniel's mind until they became consuming obsessions. His words were punctuated by angry underlines, pages where the pen had pressed so hard it nearly tore the paper. The rage was palpable, a living, breathing thing trapped within those pages. What disturbed Reynolds most wasn't just the anger, it was the sense of inevitability. Reading through Daniel's journal was like watching a slow-motion collapse, each entry one more brick falling from a once sturdy wall. There were no immediate threats, no explicit mention of killing Liam, but the psychological roadmap was clear. Daniel had been slipping deeper into a state of dangerous fixation, and Liam Carter had been the target at the center of it all. With the hoodie and the journal now in evidence, the cumulative weight against Daniel was overwhelming. It wasn't just speculation or circumstantial whispers anymore. There was blood. There were words, raw, unguarded, damning words. There was intent, emotional motive, and the unmistakable portrait of a young man who had allowed his envy, isolation, and anger to metastasize into something monstrous. Detective Reynolds knew that the next step would be critical. She couldn't simply rely on the evidence alone. She needed to confront Daniel, to break through whatever carefully crafted mask he had prepared for himself. She needed to make him face the magnitude of what he had done, not just for the sake of the case, but for the sake of closure, for Liam's grieving family, and for a campus still reeling from the shattering of its illusions. There would be no more hiding behind walls of polite denial or calculated indifference. The net was closing in. Armed with the damning evidence in one hand and a burning resolve in the other, Detective Reynolds prepared herself for a final, decisive confrontation with the boy who had, out of jealousy and despair, shattered the fragile peace of Bradbury College forever. The interrogation room was small, sterile, and heavy with an atmosphere of impending collapse. Its pale blue walls, a color chosen to calm the nerves of suspects, only seemed to amplify the suffocating tension inside. Daniel Whitmore sat at the lone metal table, his posture rigid, his hands clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles blanched white. Across from him, Detective Laura Reynolds settled into her seat with a slow, deliberate calm, laying out the evidence like a master chess player arranging pieces before a final, inevitable checkmate. She began methodically, presenting the blood-stained hoodie, the damning thread that tied Daniel irrefutably to the scene of Liam Carter's brutal death. At first, Daniel stared at it with a blank, unreadable expression, his gaze flickering briefly with what could have been fear or guilt. His lips tightened, but he said nothing. Then came the journal. Reynolds didn't need to dramatize it. She read aloud excerpts in a low, unwavering voice. "He took everything from me. Maybe it's better if he's gone." Each word seemed to carve deeper cracks into Daniel's stoic mask. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his breathing shallow and uneven, the tension in the room mounting with every passing second. When Reynolds finally pushed the journal and hoodie across the table toward him, the silence between them grew unbearably thick. She leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with him. "You wrote it. You wore it. You can't deny it, Daniel," she said, her voice firm but not cruel. "This is your chance to tell the truth before it buries you." But something had changed, and it had changed profoundly. By senior year, the portrait of camaraderie had cracked and crumbled. Their friendship, once vibrant, had curdled into something brittle and volatile. Those who lived in the same dormitory wing described overhearing brutal arguments, not the loud, drunken spats of typical college disagreements, but cold, cutting exchanges that dripped with resentment. In the seminar rooms, they clashed openly, their debates escalating beyond academic discourse into barely veiled personal attacks. It wasn't just philosophical differences anymore, it was personal, deeply personal. Friends noticed the shift. Where once Liam and Daniel had been seen together constantly, grabbing coffee, studying under the same oak tree on the quad, attending rallies side by side, now there was a conspicuous distance between them. Weeks would pass without a single word exchanged. Glances were sharp, curt nods replaced handshakes, and an icy tension seemed to fill any room they shared. Rumors, as they often do in tightly knit college communities, began to swirl. Some said Daniel had grown jealous, a slow, simmering envy that poisoned every interaction. Once viewed as Liam's academic equal, Daniel had started to falter. His grades, once impeccable, slipped quietly downward. Opportunities that had once been within reach began to slip away as well, most notably a prestigious fellowship, the Hayworth Scholarship, that Daniel had desperately coveted since sophomore year. It was a career-making award, and losing it would have stung under any circumstances. But losing it to Liam Carter? That was salt in the wound. When the fellowship shortlist was posted, Liam's name was there, gleaming in bold letters. Daniel's was absent. Those who were close enough to see behind Daniel's composed facade spoke of the devastation he tried and failed to hide. And in the weeks that followed, his resentment seemed to harden into something sharper. Not just disappointment, but a cold, festering anger. Reynolds paid careful attention to Daniel during their interview. He was calm, unnervingly so. His answers were crisp, rehearsed, scrubbed clean of emotion. On paper, he said all the right things. He mourned Liam, expressed shock at the tragedy, insisted that while they had drifted apart, he still respected him. But Reynolds, a seasoned reader of human behavior, noticed the subtle tics that told a different story. The way Daniel's fingers tapped compulsively against the table, the brief flicker of a muscle tightening in his jaw when Liam's name came up, the hollow quality behind his eyes when he spoke of respect. Bitterness clung to him like smoke. The timing was suspicious as well. Daniel had no concrete alibi for the window in which the murder occurred. He claimed he had been studying alone in the economics building, an assertion that, frustratingly, no one could verify. Campus security logs showed no sign-in or sign-out activity from Daniel during that time, and none of his classmates recalled seeing him at the late-night study sessions that were a common ritual during midterm season. Adding to Reynolds' suspicion was a small but critical detail. Daniel had access. As Liam's former roommate, Daniel knew the ins and outs of Liam's habits. He would have known that Liam often retreated to the eastern wing of the library to work late into the night, a quieter, less trafficked section perfect for deep concentration and, chillingly, perfect for an ambush. And there was the matter of the murder weapon itself. The antique letter opener, once a decorative piece kept in the library's rare book room, wasn't something a casual visitor would stumble across easily. It was tucked away behind a locked glass case, a case that, according to maintenance logs, had been broken into just days before the murder but had gone unnoticed due to a clerical oversight. Someone who knew the library well, someone comfortable enough to move through its forgotten corners, could have seized the opportunity. Daniel, a political science major with a minor in literature, had spent countless hours in those very rooms during his first years at Bradbury. As Reynolds left the interview room, she felt the weight of the case settling heavier on her shoulders. Daniel Whitmore wasn't just a person of interest. He was a prime suspect, a man whose broken friendship, professional jealousy, and wounded pride could very well have fermented into something far more dangerous. Motive, opportunity, means. And perhaps most damning of all, the hollowed-out look of a young man who had once walked side by side with greatness, only to find himself left behind, and unable to forgive it. Still, Reynolds knew better than to rush to judgment. On the surface, Daniel fit the profile. But Bradbury College, with all its polished veneers and hidden fractures, had already proven that things were rarely as simple as they seemed. There were deeper currents swirling beneath the tragedy of Liam Carter's death. And Daniel Whitmore, whether guilty or innocent, was tangled in them more deeply than anyone else. In murder investigations, it is often not the grand gestures or elaborate schemes that bring the truth to light. More often, it is the small, almost careless mistakes, tiny fractures in the facade, that unravel even the most carefully constructed lies. For Detective Laura Reynolds, the breakthrough she needed came from just such a slip. It was during the second search of Daniel Whitmore's dormitory room, a cramped, dimly lit space that seemed frozen in a disarray of half-read books, abandoned coffee cups, and crumpled notes. The first sweep by the forensic team had turned up nothing conclusive, only the usual clutter of college life. But Reynolds, seasoned by years of chasing down the truth in the shadows of human nature, insisted on a deeper, more invasive search. It was behind a battered, rusted radiator, wedged so far back that it would have been easy to overlook, that an officer found it, a dark gray hoodie, balled up and stuffed hastily out of sight. To the casual eye, it might have appeared like just another forgotten garment, but the trained eyes of the forensic team immediately spotted something else. Along the cuffs and trailing up the sleeves were faint, rusty smudges, barely visible against the fabric.
Blood.
Even before the lab results came back, Reynolds knew. As she handed off instructions to her team, to pull security footage, to cross-reference swipe card access logs, to interview library staff, Reynolds felt the familiar rush of clarity that came at the beginning of a new hunt. This wasn't just a case of solving a murder. This was about tearing back the polished facade of Bradbury College and uncovering the secrets that festered beneath. And Laura Reynolds had never left a secret buried for long. Detective Laura Reynolds wasted no time launching the first wave of interviews. Still working beneath the heavy hush of shock that had settled over Bradbury College, she moved methodically, speaking to friends, classmates, professors, even library staff, slowly weaving together the first, fragile threads of Liam Carter's life. At first glance, Liam appeared to be everything Bradbury prided itself on producing. He was a golden boy, sharp-minded, articulate, charismatic. Professors sang his praises. He had earned a scholarship on academic merit alone, an impressive feat in a school where legacy and wealth still quietly pulled invisible strings. Liam had participated in multiple student organizations, volunteered with local nonprofits, and even led spirited campus debates that often drew crowds to the quad. To many, he seemed destined for greatness, a future senator, perhaps, or a renowned journalist exposing corruption on a global stage. But as Reynolds pressed deeper, the polished image began to crack. Hidden beneath the accolades and handshakes was a growing storm. Over the past several months, Liam had embarked on a senior thesis project that was anything but conventional. Rather than selecting a safe, academic topic, Liam had set his sights squarely on Bradbury College itself, aiming to peel back the pristine layers of tradition and reveal what he believed to be a darker, festering core. His project, tentatively titled Veil of Privilege, an investigation into institutional corruption at Bradbury College, sought to expose a series of alleged wrongdoings: favoritism in scholarship awards, questionable financial dealings within the administration, even whispers of hush-money payments made to quietly resolve accusations against influential donors and alumni. It was bold. It was dangerous. And it had made Liam enemies, powerful ones. Professors who had once championed his brilliance grew distant. Some gave him thinly veiled warnings cloaked in academic language. Tread carefully, Liam. Some stones are better left unturned. Others were more blunt, reportedly telling him outright that his project could cause trouble for everyone involved, including himself. Among his peers, the reaction had been just as divisive. There were those who admired Liam's fearlessness, even idolized it, students who whispered about him in reverent tones, calling him a truth-teller and the conscience of Bradbury. But just as many resented him, particularly those whose families had deep, generational ties to the college. For them, Bradbury was a legacy to be protected, not dissected. Rumors swirled that certain elite student groups, old money fraternities, secret societies, influential student councils, viewed Liam's crusade as a direct threat to their inherited privilege. Reynolds scribbled page after page of notes as the testimonies poured in. Words and phrases repeated themselves like the chorus of a sinister song. Fearless, reckless, wouldn't back down, didn't know when to stop. Friends recalled how Liam had received anonymous threats, cruel, mocking notes slipped under his dorm room door, warning him to drop it while he still could. His roommate mentioned an incident just 2 weeks prior where Liam's laptop had been tampered with, files mysteriously deleted after he left it unattended in a library corral. It became increasingly clear to Reynolds that Liam's death was unlikely to be the result of some random act of violence. This wasn't a mugging gone wrong, or a crime of opportunity. It had all the hallmarks of a silencing, a desperate, calculated act to stop a young man who was growing dangerously close to revealing secrets that powerful people wanted buried. As the scope of the investigation expanded, so too did the list of potential suspects. It was no longer just a question of personal animosity. There were professors, administrators, wealthy students, even alumni, all of whom had something to lose if Liam's project ever saw the light of day. Reynolds knew from experience that in cases like this, motive was rarely simple. It often lived at the intersection of fear, ambition, loyalty, and rage. And here at Bradbury, those emotions churned just beneath the surface, hidden behind practiced smiles and polished manners. She leaned back in her chair late that night, reviewing her notes under the dim glow of a desk lamp. The pristine, serene campus that outsiders admired had revealed its first true face to her, a web of influence, secrets, and silent hostilities. Liam Carter hadn't just been writing a thesis. He had been lighting a fuse, and someone had been willing to kill to snuff it out before it reached the powder keg. As Detective Laura Reynolds sifted through the tangled web of testimonies and campus rumors, one name began to rise steadily to the forefront: Daniel Whitmore. On the surface, Daniel's connection to Liam Carter was simple, almost painfully so. They had been freshman roommates, assigned randomly but bonding almost instantly over a shared love for politics, chess marathons that stretched late into the night, and heated discussions about classic literature over greasy takeout. In the early days, they had been inseparable, two bright lights burning in parallel, both destined, it seemed, for remarkable futures. To anyone who knew them then, Liam and Daniel were a team, sharp, competitive, but always friendly, pushing each other toward greater heights.